Thanks everybody for showing up this early after apparently a very late night. I went to the bathroom 2 minutes before this and there were 3 people in the hall, so that's who I was expecting to be presenting to. The very first slide is going to be this. This is not for you folks, this is for people on YouTube. If they happen to watch this afterwards. A lot of the content of this talk is going to be geared toward a bit of an explanation as to why our users might want to donate to GNOME. I will start with this. I have been told not to talk about death, but I think that's a very difficult thing to do when you're a mortal being. So there are a couple mentions of death in the talk. If that's a trigger for you, then you should probably leave the room. If you're on YouTube, you should probably just not watch the video. A little bit about me. I like this saying for myself. I'm only medium smart, but what I lack in intelligence, I more than compensate for in stubbornness. This is kind of my intention in this role as executive director. I want to push through with perhaps unreasonable force on a few things. A little bit about my background for those who don't know me or who haven't read my introductory blog post on Planet GNOME. I started a worker-owned software cooperative in India back in 2012-ish with 7 friends. And we grew that for a while. I handed over the reins, and the woman who I handed the reins over to is still taking care of that company, still exists, still successful. I took a couple years off, and then I spent 6 years in commercial open source. So that's kind of my open source background. I'm not really from a traditional free software background, as many of you folks would be. I'm also into off-grid cabins, which is going to come up a few times in this talk. So this is my off-grid cabin. I really like the trees around the off-grid cabin. So this is on the east coast in Nova Scotia, about an hour and a half from Halifax, where I now live. I'm not from there originally. And the reason that I bring this up, this is kind of the Atlantic Ocean, sort of, that you can see in the background. It's a bit of a cove that the cabin is positioned on. So the reason I bring this up is because I have a short story about Ron, who is Ron. It doesn't really matter. It's a chainsaw story. This isn't the death part, I promise. So Ron was an off-gridder, which I initially thought was cool. He bought 2 lots in Nova Scotia. He bought one further east, and he bought one south of where my cabin was located. He seemed to be a nice guy, and he emailed me for the first time announcing who he was, and he said, "Hi, I bought the lot south of you. If I wanted to build a house there," and his description was to move there to die. So speaking of death, would you let me build a road if I wanted to build a house? And I said, "Oh, of course." Like, this retiree, ex-off-gridder, he wants to build a house. I should let him build a road if he needs one. But as it happened, what Ron really wanted was to quadruple his money. And the way that this ended up was Ron decided on threats and blackmail as the method of getting his money. So Ron's threats and he made good on his threats. He started cutting the trees from the bottom of the blue line, which is the road. So the road ends, that little orange square is my cabin, more or less. And you have to take a canoe or you have to walk down a very uncomfortable cobblestone beach to get to the cabin. All those lots on the south end of this peninsula are boat access only by deed. So there is no road on paper or in reality. But Ron thought he would cut a road by cutting down the trees across a bunch of properties he didn't own. It's a long story. But he cut the trees basically up to my cabin, promising that he was going to pave a 60-foot wide road to that point, and then he was going to get a right-of-way to his lot, which is the one in red. I found out about this because he sent me a notice saying, hi, I'm chainsawing all the trees on the peninsula so that I can build a gigantic road. And then later, he sent me this email. In case you can't read it from where you're sitting, it says, hi again, Stephen. While chainsawing yesterday, I had a thought I'd like to share. If you throw it out, that's fine. It's the last straw attempt that in my mind makes a great deal of sense. I also want to note, we will have our disagreements, but we don't need to be mortal enemies. I don't know if that was a threat. Why not purchase our property for $55,000? He bought it for $16,000. Which was the listed price. Wouldn't that solve everybody's concerns? Let me explain my thought process. And then he goes on this bizarre 14-point screed about how it would solve the chainsawing and I wouldn't have a road and then nobody would be bulldozing right up to my cabin. So obviously I hired a lawyer and dealt with this situation. But for quite a while afterward, I was fairly angry. I would wake up in the morning and I would be angry. I would go to sleep at night or not sleep at night and I would be angry. Why was this person coming to me? Why were they bothering me? Why was this a part of my life? And I realized fairly quickly that the anger was hurting me. It was becoming a sort of obsession. And eventually, Ron found a buyer. Some random bankers from Bermuda bought his lot along with the lot next to it. And I've never seen or heard from them. And he was gone forever. And I was left to wonder why I was so angry in the first place. So this is a microcosm. I'm going to exploit the microcosm to talk a little bit about politics. Oh no. So when it comes to politics, the cabin story is a bit of a cautionary tale. I think there's plenty to be angry about in 2025. But anger is debatably our most unhelpful emotion. It doesn't cause us to act as much as we love to believe that it does. We only act when we are thinking rationally. So the anger might cause us to feel a motivation to act eventually, but while we're angry, we don't act. We only react. And if you're angry, you're hurting yourself, and you're probably hurting other people around you. So we have to be a bit careful not to hurt ourselves or others. So I would like to encourage everyone to please be careful. Be careful with yourself. Be careful with other people around you. When you're on the internet, if you rage posting becomes your persona, and it becomes the brand of GNOME. And I think that that's unhealthy. Read what you write as your audience. Take a minute to do that every time. Think about all the different people around the world who are going to read what you're writing as yourself, as a member of the GNOME community, whether you're a contributor or otherwise, users as well, like me. And try to notice when you might be perceived to be angry, because I think a lot of us write things in a way that's very direct, but that others can see as being angry even if it's not. And I would say that most people on this planet are not like Ron, and maybe maybe he's a nice person if you actually get to know him, but most people are really genuinely lovely. I think from meeting everyone here at GUADEC, you can say that about everyone here, but I think the vast majority of people that I've met in my life in any country are lovely, lovely people, and they don't have the worst intentions, and we should never assume that they do. And so this is not a warning to us, the greater GNOME community of developers, contributors, and users. This is a warning to social media, because I think that there's a moment right now, the past 5 years especially, but the past 5 to 10 years, where the socialization of the internet has gotten really intense, and particularly to YouTubers and podcasters. And there's a spectrum, right? There are people out there that genuinely just want to hurt other people, and I'm not speaking to them. I'm speaking to people who genuinely want to do good in this world. that drama posts affect real lives. Hackers are real people. So the names that you pull out of a mailing list or that you pull out of discourse or that you pull out of wherever, and they're usually not celebrities, like no offense, but no one in this room is Linus Torvalds, right? And even Linus probably doesn't deserve to be hotshot at from some podcast. And so that's not to you folks, that's to maybe someone who might watch this on YouTube. So all of that is kind of a preface to this blog post I read once. I don't remember where it's from. I don't remember what the title of the blog post was. But the blog post essentially posited this idea as a component of what it was saying. There was a lot about the blog post I didn't like, but I liked this idea. And the idea was that our political spectrum that we tend to think of is outmoded. First of all, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to apply it to every country on the planet, but we have this tendency to do that. Being right-wing in the United States might mean that you convince other people that they should own guns. Being right-wing in India might mean that you kill someone for eating beef. These things are not the same. And this one-dimensional political spectrum, I don't think it makes a lot of sense. Maybe it never made any sense, but it's not that useful a tool, in my opinion, for the world of 2025. And so this person's blog post essentially said, well, let's rotate the entire thing 90 degrees and look at this in terms of if you're American or Canadians or British, it's like red, blue. If you're Indian, it's white, orange. This is like left-right political spectrum. Let's make it black, green. And so the top is black and the bottom is green. Again, on that blog post, I can't remember where it's from. And these are sort of the categories. Black is about science and space exploration and technology and accelerating human development. And green is about nature and being closer to Earth and natural processes. And then there are kind of all these other, I've added all these other things, right? The green is cottagecore and black is synthwave. Black might use the term open source, green might use the term free software. Black might pronounce it GNOME, green might pronounce it GNOME. You can be both at the same time, right? You can wear a suit every day, but still live in an off-grid cabin on occasion. To be a bit narcissistic about it. But everyone in this political spectrum has some shared ideals that I think are increasingly common, right? That we're inclusive, that we're peaceful, that we want resources and public services for everyone. And maybe this is a little bit more the people in this room, that we believe that intellectual property is stupid and that we have the right to repair and that we have the right to privacy and security first and foremost in the products that we buy. For people that don't believe this, this is my belief, I don't want to project it on you. I really do, and have a long time, I've believed that intellectual property is a stupid idea. And I explained this to my friend who lives in the cabin next to me, he's a natural gas trader, he's not a technology person. And I basically said, the idea that intellectual property code for products on their own have any real value is a bit like this hospital that is in the town next to our cabins, which basically, this is a hospital that hasn't had a doctor for 10 years, right? So it's a building, a large, expensive building that probably cost them $6–10 million to make. But it has this sign out front, urgent care by appointment, which I think every time I drive by it is amusing to me. A hospital isn't useful without doctors. The code isn't useful without the people who understand what that code does, who can evolve it, who can maintain it. And so intellectual property really should be a communal resource. It should belong to everyone. And that's part of why I'm here to work on GNOME, is because I think a lot of other people believe that same thing. So what does any of this have to do with GNOME? Cassidy gave me this explanation of why, why in 2025 is it branded GNOME? He's like, oh, it's the gnomes or the gnomes in the machine. Like they're the things making the computer work. Magic black box. And I like to put the gnomes on the spectrum. And so at the bottom, you have the forest gnomes. So this is my friend Sandy, the gas trader. This is his mushroom gnome. And then beside that is another forest gnome that my partner made for me. Very cute. He's a forest gnome despite the fact that he lives in front of an HP printer. And at the top I was trying to come up with what are the black end of the spectrum gnomes. And those are, in my mind, doozers. I don't know how many of you remember Fraggle Rock from the 80s, but the doozers live underground and they just build for the sake of building. They love building. They love nothing else but to build and construct these like massive structures that the Fraggles then come and eat, and they don't care because if the Fraggles didn't eat the structures, they would have no space to build because they would just build themselves out of a home. And I think that this is cute, but not really what I'm talking about. So I think there is a reason that I brought up these other points about anger and the risk of anger. I think we have a right to repair ourselves. So the trolls and bullies and even criminals of the internet love an easy target. And I would say that GNOME is an easy target at the moment because GNOME has had a difficult couple of years. The foundation has had an even longer difficult time, arguably. And so I would say, rather than focusing on those difficulties, continue to focus on building and everything else will sort of follow. So this idea of social repair, this idea that most people are really lovely and that we shouldn't assume the worst, whether it's us in this room or whether it's the people out on the internet who are talking about GNOME, because as an outsider, because I'm not a GNOME contributor, I'm just a GNOME user, I've noticed that people have not a few people have this tendency to talk about GNOME as though it's some sort of like evil corporate entity, despite the fact that it's really quite a collaborative effort still. It's still a pure free software project. And I would say that as much as I would like them not to dunk on GNOME, I would like us not to dunk on other people's projects. And so this includes attempts to push Linux out into the world in various ways. This includes some of the stuff in the black category. So I would say if somebody is experimenting with LLMs, for example, don't be too hard on them just because you don't believe in that. Let them have their own agency. And so there's a component of brand repair here, which is if we focus on the mission, then that becomes the way that we conduct ourselves in public, where this is the only thing that we care about, is GNOME's mission. Not the only thing we care about, but this is the primary concern that we have. And that becomes branding and marketing. And in my mind, the product is the brand. So I've had a lot of conversations while I was working up to taking on this role, where people would ask, what is GNOME? What is GNOME Foundation? What are you doing? And I like Rob's description of GNOME's branding problem. It's not about logos or names or any of that, but that we have the sandwich problem, which is around my cabin, there's a lobster fisherman. If I ask the lobster fisherman, have you heard of Linux? He has, right? Despite the fact nothing could be more invisible than Linux as a product. And if you ask Linux users, have they heard of GNOME, even if they're running it? Many of them haven't. They've heard of SUSE, Ubuntu, Fedora, whatever, Debian, whatever they happen to be running. And so we're sort of in the middle. And I would say that's actually a good thing. You can embrace being a utility. And I think it's good to enjoy being that kind of seamless, apparently effortless product. And I would say it's much like GUADEC itself. Like, I think many of us, myself included, come here and it seems seamless and effortless because of the efforts of the people who put on the event for us. And as a consumer, it's nice to be able to take those things for granted. I think it's a good thing that our users take GNOME for granted. But at the same time, the product does have a brand. If you want to brand it, you can. And I think we should embrace that as well. So there's a component of this, which is foundation repair. So I took this photo while we were walking to dinner the other night. It was a foundation-y looking photo. It's also a little broken. You'll see the finance report, a brief finance report this afternoon at the AGM. I think the foundation will benefit from really focusing on continuous improvement toward a focus on the mission. So I actually think most contributors are already quite focused on the mission. The foundation can also focus that way. What are we continuously improving toward? In my mind, policy governance. Policy, yay, everyone's really excited about. So policy governance is, to an extent, this picture. Obviously, the picture is more complicated than this, but the more I read, and I'm not a nonprofit person. I've been in the for-profit world or government world for 20 plus years. I've worked with nonprofits, but only as a volunteer. The more I read about 501c3, the more I love it. It's really well thought out. It's really well constructed. It is a nice structure for us to have a nonprofit that supports GNOME. And the structure of a 501c3 is that the 501c3 is the servant of the membership. Whatever the membership happens to be, it doesn't have to be the way that GNOME has membership. But the foundation basically operates under the leadership or the execution of the executive director and the staff. The board are the representative democracy of the membership, and they are my bosses. And the board is you. If you want to be on the board next year, you can. There will be some slots opening up, some seats. And the lever that you have as the board under policy governance is you can fire the ED, right? You set policy, and then you ask the ED and the staff to execute on that policy. And if they're matching the policy, if their actions match the policy, then good. And if they're not matching the policy, then bad. At the moment, we have a blend, right? We have a pretty significant executive committee. We have a lot of working board members, which is good at the moment because we're stretched fairly thin. But eventually, that should no longer be the case. And the board should really just say, here's the 5-year vision, the 10-year vision. This is what we want for the project, and this is what we want the foundation to do to serve the project. And then the rest of us should just get to work on that thing. So the reason, I'm not a policy wonk, right? The reason that I'm excited to be a part of this is because I think that there's quite a special moment right now. And that moment is maybe the year of the Linux desktop, except I would say that that happened already. And this is part of why I'm excited to be a part of this in 2025. The year of the Linux desktop, for me personally, was 2010. In 2010, I worked for a finance company, like a trading firm, and they had 2 or 3 full-time staff members who managed Red Hat Enterprise Linux on desktop machines in our office. The software and the hardware were perfectly aligned. So there was this vertical integration was one of the bullets under black on that slide. It worked perfectly, right, in 2010. Ran GNOME. I didn't think about GNOME. I didn't think about the Linux desktop. It worked as well as my Mac. It worked as well as the Windows machine that I still had to use for some C# development at the time. And I feel like we really just need to take the W. So this is something that George Castro and I talked about, which is we won already. Somebody won, or it wasn't me, I wasn't involved in the winning, but celebratory, right? That this was my fantasy 15 to 20 years ago, was to have open hardware that I could run open, free software on top of, and it exists today. And you have multiple vendors doing this, and you have multiple vendors doing this really well. And it's not aspirational, it's something that's kind of, it's either done or it's on its way. And so I like to tell this story about, I don't know, has anyone in the room been to Strangeloop ever? There's like one person. So Strangeloop is, I'm a back-end software developer historically, right? So Strangeloop is like distributed computing, databases, networking kind of things. They are, to a degree, a large degree, our audience, the kinds of people who would attend a conference like Strangeloop. And I attended the last Strangeloop in 2023. This is the Opera House in St. Louis, where part of the conference takes place. You have these bears, two giant concrete bears on either side of the Opera House, and they have these amazing signs that I love right in front of them. There's a "Please don't climb on the bears." And after the conference, every day, you'll find people just sitting on the steps of the Opera House with their laptops out and hacking on some random thing, right? 15 years ago, 2010, I think, was one of my first Strangeloops. It was hip to be on the stairs of the Opera House with your Mac out. In 2023, that was the uncool laptop, and everybody on the stairs that was trying to show off had a framework. And you can be certain that they're not running Windows, right? Nobody thinks that's cool. And so your desktop environment is spreading pretty far and wide already as the new dominant environment that people are leaning into. And so I really do believe that GNOME can dominate the market. I think it's slow, continuous growth that never really has a good reason for falling off. So Windows 10 is end of life as of October, and the KDE folks and some GNOME folks have come together for this end of 10 initiative, which I think is really fun. And it's sort of like the old 90s and early 2000s install fests, except they're called repair cafes now. On the right are macOS releases, and the jump corresponds to the death of Steve Jobs, apparently. I don't know if that's actually how this works or if there are other reasons. But if you own a Mac like I do, I have some iOS development that I have to do on weekends for another nonprofit. You noticed when this happened, right? Because every point release of macOS started breaking things, big things. Like, oh my God, your monitor doesn't work anymore. Sorry, we broke USB-C completely. Please wait a couple months until you can use your monitor again. For those of us with incredibly bad eyes, that meant no computer, because I can't really work on a laptop for extended periods of time. The business models of these organizations do not incentivize them to improve their products for their users. And you're seeing that now. The graph is tilting pretty steeply down, whereas GNOME, in my 20 years of experience with it, just gets better every year. It just gets a little better. It gets a little better. You may have your complaints, but it's going to get a little better next release. It's going to get a little better next release because we serve the users exclusively. We don't have some abstract revenue model that needs to be supported by cramming AI into every corner of the thing or taking screenshots of our users' desktops or whatever, showing them ads, whatever weird thing. And at the same time, we can dominate this new market, new machines, that's great, but we can also revitalize old machines. So I'm not a social media person, never in my life have I seen so much activity. Then I randomly posted one day, I have an old MacBook Air from 2011. And this is another story that I like to tell because I think it's just really joyful. I took out the Mac, and I hadn't opened it in a couple of years, I don't think. And I popped the lid, and I saw, oh, can I do like update things with Homebrew? And I'd never seen this before. Homebrew shouted at me in the terminal. It was in a word, stop! Like, don't email us, don't complain. You're not allowed to use Homebrew anymore. Like, everything is broken on this computer. And I expect that from Apple, but I didn't really expect that from Homebrew. And I was a bit shocked. I was like, oh, okay, it's really fundamentally broken. Like, this, no security updates, sure, but also I can't even like make my software work anymore. And I thought, what the heck? I'm going to take Debian Stable, which was, this wasn't that long ago. This was maybe 4 or 5 months ago. So it was Debian Stable versus Debian 12, right, which is 2 years old at this point. And I was like, I'm going to toss it on this MacBook Air and see what happens. And I did, and it worked fine. And I had a stable, albeit very old version of GNOME, and I had Flatpak. And so I could install Discord and Slack and Spotify and whatever, right? I could still communicate with all those areas of the universe that don't necessarily subscribe to free software ideals or open source ideals. This is a real turning point where I can take, if you look closely, like the tops of those keyboard keys are completely dissolved and worn out. Like the plastic flakes off every time you type on it. This is a very old machine that GNOME runs perfectly on. Somebody in this room is paying a lot of attention to the details to make that work because you're doing a better job than Apple. I think the other moment that is of significance right now is people are a bit fed up with the cloud. And I had this conversation with Alan the other day. Probably local first will never win-win, right? It's not going to dominate everything. It inherently kind of doesn't have a business model attached to it. So it's difficult for it to win in that way that Linux won on the server and is winning on the desktop. Oh no, 10 minutes left. Okay, thank you. But I think that a lot of people are really intrigued by this idea, and it's the right kind of people, right? It's hackers, free software hackers, but it's also just software developers in general who are very, very tired of $30,000 a month AWS bills, are very, very tired of SaaS products that just vaporize, you know, 1 quarter. Oh, sorry, we stopped making this. Oh, sorry, we changed the feature set so it's incompatible with the thing that you bought originally. And there's a nice place for the free desktop here because for whatever, well, not for whatever reason, it's understandable. The local first people keep targeting the web. They're like, oh, we'll make it work in the browser. We'll make it work in the browser. It's like, you know what? You have a platform that's actually a lot better and a lot more convenient than the browser for building local first software. It's your computer. So you can just build things directly on the computer and it'll be really nice and really easy. The reason I bring this up is because I joined the Ink and Switch Discord after the Strange Loop 2023. They had a local first unconf after the conference, and Ink and Switch invited people to join their Discord, and I was joined the Discord, and all of a sudden I was seeing names from the 2004 to 2010 era, like people that had otherwise kind of disappeared from my radar. And I was like, oh, interesting. Like all these old fogies like me, but much more prominent, have kind of coalesced over here in this local first territory because they think it's interesting, because they think something fun is going to happen there. There's also a moment now where you can look to the future and be like, oh, there's still a big bunch of challenges that we can go tackle. So I don't think that you can do pure Linux on a phone and say it's going to work every time the way that you can with GNOME on the desktop today, but maybe in 10 years, I don't know how long it's going to take. Sri showed me his OnePlus running post-market OS the other day. I was pleasantly surprised by how smooth it is, how kind of cool it is, how satisfying it is to just have the familiarity of the apps that I use every day just right there on a phone. And I think that this is both worlds, right? you're reclaiming old hardware, green, but you can also do something new and sexy with fancy new hardware, the black category as well. And so ultimately, I wouldn't be here if I didn't expect that future GNOME means that it's for everyone and that it's absolutely everywhere, across every piece of hardware that you can buy, in every country, in every language, with strong accessibility for folks who have accessibility needs. So how do we get there? There are some things I think that we can do. I would say, one, we should be forming more alliances. There are other people that believe in the things that we believe, and we should boost them, right? Like, we should get behind the products and the projects that are doing the things that align with GNOME's mission. GNOME's mission doesn't just need to be about the desktop. It can be about all these other aspects of computing that we have right now. These are all our friends, right? And I would say that keep them honest. So we have to focus on our mission. That mission can be projected on these other folks. And I think that if they start screwing up, we can hold them accountable, right? So I don't know how I never knew this until this most recent year, that like Libra, which is a word that I've never really liked that much because it's impossible for a lot of speakers of different languages to pronounce, particularly in a very English-centric world. It was self-centered, but that Fry basically has the same appearance as free, and so you can put it in the same place, free software, and it's unambiguous. For the last 15 years or so, free software and open source were kind of, I mean, they've always legally been the same thing, right? But there was a time when it mattered what you said. And it feels like, again, it sort of matters what you say, because you can say open source and mean open core or open enough. You can't really do that with free software. Nobody's like, my open core free software product, right? That doesn't exist. And so you can start saying that word again, or free software. And that gives you a tool to hold our friends and allies accountable if they start drifting toward the enemy camp, right? You can stop boosting them. You can stop installing their software. I would say beware of open core for that reason, that it's not necessarily aligned with the things that we want mission-wise. And I would say beware of good enough, right? There are a lot of products that I still hear people saying like, oh, Google Suite, it's good enough. It's like, it's good enough right now. You know it's going to fail you in the same way that Windows would fail you, in the same way that macOS would fail you, in the same way that iOS will fail you. So maybe get off of it before the collapse. I think we already do this, but I don't know that this is, again, for YouTube, right? I don't know how many people realize that this transition has happened. And I mean, you can kind of credit Apple for doing this initially. We're pushing apps with the iPhone, and that's become the method of software delivery inside of an environment like GNOME or KDE, right? And this adheres to both sides of this pseudo-political spectrum. Flat Hub is a product. Flat Pak is a platform. Other people can set up their own Flat Hubs, right? So Rob was mentioning the other day, he's like, I'm surprised that there isn't like a Libra Hub, thank you, or Fry Hub, or whatever you might want to call it yet, but it's probably coming, right? And so last, how can the foundation help, right? Like, how can the foundation help GNOME into this future? Is this even a future you want? I mean, many people will probably disagree with me on a few of these points, which is why I want to leave 15 minutes for questions. But I think the foundation can help the GNOME project by embracing institution. So this is both the project and the foundation. So I liked Emmanuel's talk. I like the idea that you want to decouple yourself from people, right? People come, people go, people get burnt out. The project is this organism unto itself. The foundation is an organism unto itself. 501c3 is structured in such a way that it anticipates this, right? We should have succession plans. If you had a 40-year ED, you should know many decades before that person exits, who's coming next? How are they coming next? What is the plan for booting them up? 40 years, 3 months. So when we incorporated Nilenso, cooperatives in India are very weird. You can essentially have 9 different kinds of agricultural cooperative or 2 different kinds of dairy cooperative, or maybe it's the other way around, I forget. But you can't really incorporate a technology cooperative in India under co-op law because you can't sell outside of India's borders and you can't hire international employees, of which I was one. And so we structured Nilenso as an LLP, sort of like a law firm. And we hired Kaitan, which is this very fancy law firm in Bangalore, and they told us, focus on the institution. We focus on turning the organization into this entity that persists beyond any one of you, right? There's you 8, right, to begin with, but some of you will leave. I left. Many other people left. And it remains healthy. It continues to exist beyond us. And even if we didn't retire, even if we didn't go find another job, like eventually there will be an end, right? I apologize. There's trigger warning all the way at the beginning, but just for this, right? I don't want to think about the people in this room dying, but I do want to acknowledge that that's a reality that we need to plan for. The other thing that the foundation can do is stronger marketing. So I like this idea that the product is the brand. I want the foundation to lean into that, right? The product serves people, the foundation serves the product, and the mission is the product. The thing that we're doing is solving universal computing for everybody in the world as best we can. And so to do that, we need some new fundraising. So the foundation, as I said, needs to serve the mission in on the project, but I want this message to be for our users, right? I want people in this room and contributors to GNOME community members to be skeptical of me, because you need to fire me if I'm not doing a good job. Or any ED, if they're doing a bad job, you fire them because that's your responsibility. Certainty, I've said this a lot of places, certainty is the only enemy of science, and evidence is the only friend of science. Be scientific and be rational about this. Wait until our goal for the number of individual contributors, our first goal is 3,000 individual contributors. Our secondary goal is 6,000 individual contributors. Thank you. And so push the foundation to work toward that, and push the foundation to support the project if you see us doing things that you think are a distraction, a waste of time, a waste of money. Be critical. We're tough. We'll manage, right? We're here to serve you. And now I'm not speaking to YouTube unless you're a contributor on YouTube. I'm speaking to the people in this room. We exist to serve the project. And so wait for evidence that we're doing that or evidence that we're not, and help steer us accordingly. So this is one last pitch to the people on YouTube to go to donate.gnome.org and contribute. One component of being a 501c3, and one of the things that I like about being a 501c3, is that we have a public support test. And so Jeff and Rob and I went for lunch the other day, and Jeff had a good point. He's like, every individual donor that comes, every user who supports GNOME, ups the ceiling for big corporate donors to come and give money to support the project in a bigger way. And I think that's a nice way of thinking about it, that every user that comes means we can take money from more people who can really afford it. Of course, if you can't afford it, please don't donate money to us. We'll survive without you hurting yourselves. And with that, do folks have questions? Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. If anyone has questions, please raise your hand.
Hi. Tons of persons in our community are poor and struggle to pay rent and are minoritized and discriminated in many other ways. And my question is, like, do you realize how violent it can be to cross the Atlantic, go on the stage and tell this bourgeois introductory tale about owning a cabin in the wood that doesn't really fill your statement that you're inclusive, in my opinion? It's a bit odd. My question is, like, this introduction is a bit odd, like out of touch with the community. I don't understand. But that's it.
I think I missed half of that. I apologize.
Okay, whatever.
In addition to being partly blind, I'm also partly deaf.
In that case, I have another question from the audience.
So my question is, given, I suppose, the recent kind of instability in what's happening in the States, does the foundation have any plans of like setting up a European branch or for perhaps safety reasons? I don't know. Perhaps this is a stupid question. I'm just thinking about that.
No, I don't think it's a stupid question at all. It's a very common question. At the moment, no. I think part of the reason that I like to explain to people that as I learn about nonprofits and as I learn about 501c3 law and compliance, that I increasingly find myself liking it, is that I think it would be very unlikely that the United States becomes so destabilized that 501c3s or nonprofits in general were sort of like dissolved as a concept. There's a lot of American society that relies on those corporate entities existing. I think at the moment the foundation is, as I mentioned, is kind of in repair mode to some degree. It's been without an ED for quite a long time. I'm very grateful to Holly and Richard for the work that they did in the various periods of difficulty that the foundation was experiencing while they were both employed with the foundation. But I think that the foundation really needs to find its feet. And one of the framings of 501c3 that I would lean on is the original paperwork of the 501c3. That I don't know if anyone in this room other than maybe Rosanna and Federico would remember. Basically, it says, like, congratulations, you're incorporated as a 501c3, 2001. We will bless you as a real 501c3 in 2006. So basically, there's a 5-year window where the IRS could come and say, yeah, actually, we changed our mind. You're not a charity. Please pay tax on all the donations that you received. That's a half decade is a long time. That's quite a significant thing to be incorporated in that way. And so I think that that's kind of the window that you should probably use as yesterday's weather. It's kind of like if it took 5 years to really properly incorporate a 501c3 for the foundation originally, you should look at a 5-year window for incorporation in another country if we choose to do that. I don't think we would set up a second nonprofit, although people have suggested that. But I think you really need to look on these long timeframes to say, where is a safe harbor for the legal entity that represents GNOME if you want to change from the United States. And maybe you want to in the future. But I think Germany is an interesting example, right? A lot of nonprofit, free and open source nonprofits incorporated in Germany in recent years. And then there was a government shift in Germany recently. They are not friendly toward free software. The current administration in Germany is not friendly toward free and open source software nonprofits. I learned this from another person running another free software nonprofit, that basically they had to move their nonprofit to Denmark because they're like, it's too much of a pain to work in Germany at the moment. So yes, you could move to Europe. You have to choose a country to incorporate in. So you need to have really like a decades-long, speaking of succession planning, right? This is succession planning to know where does the legal entity belong? Is it going to be safe there for a long time? So it's not something that we won't keep talking about and keep considering, and certainly keep an eye on the stability of the United States over the coming years. But it's not something immediate.
I see. Thank you.
Any other questions? If people online have any questions, please send them in the chats, Matrix, or Telegram.
Hello. Let me try and express this clearly. So it's a very good thing that KDE and GNOME both exist and are both different things. And we've spent a lot of, it would be an easy question to ask, like, how do we collaborate better with KDE? And there's like 20 years of history there. We've co-located the events multiple times, and we co-organized Linux App Summit and so on. But actually, I'm going to ask the opposite question. Like, what is our difference from KDE? Like, what do you think we can do differently to them, and what can they do differently to us?
Beyond the differences that already exist?
Not necessarily, no.
So at least as a user, right? Like I'm here as, I was recently hired, but I'm here as a user. Like that's kind of my role in the GNOME world. I don't think I'll ever be good enough to like contribute code to GNOME. I haven't looked at KDE. The last time I ran KDE was 2000 or 2001. So 25 years, 24 years. And I have a vision of KDE in my mind, or had, that's wildly incorrect. Right? So I have a friend who comes to a local hacker group on Monday nights. We go to a cafe and people write code. And work on their kind of like fun side project or whatever. And it was shortly after I started work at the GNOME Foundation, and he was like talking about KDE, and he's on a Mac, but he's like, I still have a place in my heart. So I have this VM where I run KDE when I want to feel something nice, right? And it was like, I have to use this Mac for work, but I run KDE. Do you want to see it? And I was like, oh yeah, sure. Like I know KDE. Show me KDE. It's very pretty, right? Like it's very slick and it's very cool, and it's still too convoluted for me. As a user, I like that GNOME is a utility, right? I like that it's invisible. I don't think you get as much gratitude necessarily. So I would say in the same way that many of us probably don't express the gratitude that we have. The example I used was GUADEC itself. We have this like wonderful event managed and run by people who are doing a fantastic job because it's very seamless, very effortless, seems effortless, right, to the consumer. The same is true of the water company or the power utility, that you only notice it when it breaks. That's kind of my relationship to GNOME, and that's actually a relationship I really like with technology. That completely stays out of my way, that my life is not about the technology. My life is about the things that I do day to day, and the technology enables that life. I think KDE has a different perspective, right? KDE wants to be there for you to have fun with it and to like play and customize. And I saw this friend opened a window, right? And was like, look at all these sweet configuration options I have. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. I do not want that, but I'm glad you do, right? And I want you to enjoy that, and I want you to have that option. And I think that you'll see, to a degree, more gratitude for that reason, because it's a thing that's more apparent, right? It's more apparent to KDE users, to a degree, that this thing is a part of their lives. It's not disappearing into the background at all. And I think that that's good. Like, that's a good differentiation between the two environments. And I don't necessarily want more than that. I think that these are great computing options, right? I don't know if there's a third option. I mean, there are smaller desktop environments that offer other things, but I feel like these are the two ways that in my 30, 35 years of using computers, that I've engaged with computers, because there was a time in my life where I would have found KDE more compelling. I think we just, as a community, I would say we just keep encouraging them to do their thing. Like, keep making a thing that's fun for your users, and hopefully they keep encouraging us to keep making a thing that's very simple and stays out of the way of the users. Which is, at least, I mean, that's my personal interpretation of how GNOME behaves. I mean, I'm sure there are as many interpretations of what GNOME is and how it behaves as there are people in this room, but.
So we have a couple more minutes. If we have one more question, I think we can take it.
I should have left in my more controversial slides.
Yeah, sorry, I'm still formulating the whole thing, so please be a little patient. During our presentation, something that caught my attention was that the vocabulary you use is very interesting. So you used brand and product and marketing and users a lot. So, and this is the part that I'm still formulating. Like, technically, like, I personally contribute to GNOME with code, and that technically probably makes me a developer. On the daily operations, on the the minutiae of the contribution process, though, I don't feel that there is a differentiation, or that clear of a differentiation between quote unquote a user and a developer. And over time, that lack of differentiation grew and grew, and it's just a massive blurry line. Like, it's like, to me, like, everyone is unequally likely to be a developer person. I understand that it is very useful, and actually, it is probably better that you don't change this whole, products and brands and users vocabulary. It's very useful for a ED to use it. But, like, do you not see, well, how do you see this lack of responsibility towards quote unquote users that some of us might feel like? I don't offer user support. I don't offer anything except the code that is as it is, no warranties or anything like that, which makes it a non-product in some sense. You just take it or take it and use it, take it or fix it, or don't take it. There's no, producty thing on it. I don't know if that makes sense to you, sorry.
No, it does. It does. I think that is it's a huge part of the way that free software works in the first place, right? You are not obligated as a developer, as an event organizer, as a designer, necessarily, though designers may feel a bit more of a pull to treat GNOME as a product. Certainly, you could contribute something to Circle that is pretty far removed from the core vision of GNOME. You could contribute something to the deep internals of GNOME that's pretty far removed from the user experience. But I think that there's like this Krishnamurti quote where he asks the people in the audience, where he's like, do you not see how identifying someone as an American or a Russian or a Mexican or an Italian, but that's violent? Like you're drawing lines between these things. The same is true for user and developer, right? We're like, put a bunch of people over in this camp and we put a bunch of people over in this camp. Obviously, it's a spectrum. Like, I could contribute code to GNOME probably in TypeScript or Python or something. The last time I wrote C was 26 years ago. I won't be contributing any C, I don't think. But people can come inside the fold. And this is actually, so the slide about apps is about this, right? That like on the periphery, somebody can take one small step inside. They may be mostly user and little tiny bit developer. I actually don't think the distinction is important. It's just useful for people who, particularly people who don't even realize they're running GNOME, right? Like so much a user, so much an invisible user that I think for them, it may be useful to use some of these words, but they're not baked into the idea that the foundation has, or that I have at least, of what GNOME is. And I think all these perspectives are valid.